Good afternoon, everybody. Over lunch, I had a nightmare that when I was going to come back up here, that Mr. Tacopina was only half done. I think, I'm not sure, but I believe I had a birthday and at least one grandchild during that closing. And I bring that up for a specific reason, and that is, do not confuse the length of that argument with the persuasiveness of it. What we kind of have gotten away from is why we're here. So this is the case of People versus Raheem Ayers. This is not People versus Mr. Efron. It's not People versus John Lewin. It's People versus Raheem Ayers. And the reason that I point that out is because if you didn't know better and you listened to the closing, you would think that either Relly was on trial, maybe I was on trial, and we're not on trial. And I think it's important when you are listening and really going through these arguments that you understand what this case is about. And for that reason, I'd love to say that I'm going to be very brief up here. And the reason I'm not going to be is that, unfortunately, I've got an obligation to make sure that I address the points that defense counsel made. Whether those points are relevant, whether those points are persuasive. I can tell you this. I won't be as long as Mr. Tacopina was, and I'm confident that you will get the case today, this afternoon. But that's where we are. I want to start with, this is Randy's Donuts. This is Randy's Donuts. This is on the corner. You're looking at Randy's. This is in Inglewood, on the corner of basically Manchester and La Cienega. This is the exit from the 405. If you're coming, we're looking northbound. And 30 years ago, when I was a young deputy DA in Torrance, I used to drive from home, and I would have to take this route on the 405. And I would, every day, I would get off on the 405, and I would tell myself that if God wanted me to get a donut, He would make sure that the light that you can't see right here was red. And as you can see, God wanted me to have a lot of donuts. I ended up, most of the time, I stopped. But there came a time where it just wasn't good enough for me to take the chance on the light. So what I would do is, it's a really long straightaway, and you can see when you're getting off the freeway, you can see that light. So what I would do is literally, I would coast my car at 20 or 25 miles an hour, making sure that I hit the red, and then I could go in and I'd get that donut. And I bring this up because passing up that donut was extremely difficult for me. Very, very hard. And most days I wasn't able to do it. And I always thought that that's probably one of the hardest things that I would have to do. And then I became a trial lawyer. Then I started trying cases. And then I started trying serious cases. And I can tell you that what it takes to pass up that donut is nothing compared to what it's like when I have to sit here during a closing argument, and the defense is up, and I have to listen. And I want to get up and I want to scream, I want to yell. I can't do it. I try to do different things, try to focus on something else, try to go to a little happy place. It's really, really hard. It's especially hard when, as in this case, Mr. Tacopina makes an argument. And I want to be clear about something. I'm going to attack the arguments that Mr. Tacopina made. Because that's what lawyers do. That's what's fair. I'm going to attack the arguments that he made. I'm going to attack the case that the defense put on. I'm not going to attack Mr. Tacopina personally. I'm not going to cast aspersions on evidence that he put on. In the end, witnesses, we don't vouch for our witnesses, ladies and gentlemen. What that means is that we put on witnesses, and those witnesses testify to what they're going to testify to. So I'm going to go through, and I'm going to very critically point out what this case is about and what it isn't about. And kind of before I get there, I want to talk a little bit about your role as jurors. So, you 16 people, we started in what year? And I know many of you, probably most, maybe all of you, none of you wanted to be here. Okay? And I get it. It's understandable. But you were chosen. It wasn't simply magic that you ended up as jurors. Both sides chose you. And honestly, and one of the few things Mr. Tacopina and I probably agree on is that in our country, it's an incredible honor to be able to be a juror, because in other countries, we don't have jury trials. We don't have any system of justice. But you were selected, and it literally is an honor. But along with that honor comes a duty and a responsibility. And I'm not going to understate it. I'm not going to pretend it's anything other than it's not. I will tell you, Mr. Kozlenik and I, we have done our duty, our responsibility in putting on this case. We have given you a case where we have proven it beyond a reasonable doubt. It's going to end up going into your hands, and I'm going to explain to you what the evidence demonstrates and what the verdict in the case should be. Some of you might be saying, well, wait a minute, I don't understand why we had a trial. Because let's face it, no matter how much the defense wants to talk about how this is all about Relly's credibility, it isn't. It's on video. What's amazing about this case is how little in the end Relly's credibility for anything that matters in the case is really an issue. Now, it certainly could have been an issue. There could have been a defense in this case. There could have been, where the defense put on evidence and they said, hey, listen, Relly, you can't see it, but Relly, when he came, had a weapon. And he said, I'm going to kill you. And the defendant at that point in time pulled a gun to defend himself. And the situation ended and Relly followed. And he threatened again, and he pulled out another gun. And that would have been difficult for us to counter, not because it's true, but because the evidence that you would have been given would have been much more problematic, much more difficult. That's not the defense they chose. The defense they chose, and I'm going to get into this in a little more time and more detail, but I want to make sure you all understand it right off the bat. This case comes down to one issue and one issue only. They are saying it's a prop gun. If it's a prop gun, he is absolutely not guilty of the charges. Not because he didn't pull it, not because he didn't fire it, but because under the law, if it's not a real firearm, it's not a violation of Penal Code Section 245, and it's not the personal use of a firearm. Now, here's what's interesting. Now, again, I'm going to explain this in more detail. Mr. Tacopina got up here and he says, absolutely, hey, listen, he did not have a real gun. It's a prop gun. But it's still self-defense. That's not true. If it is a prop gun, there is no self-defense. And the only way you can get to self-defense in this case is you have to find, one, that it was a real gun, which it clearly was a real gun. There's no question there. It was a real gun. The prop gun is a figment of the defense and the witnesses who testified to it. You have to find that not only is it a real gun and that it was fired, but that the defendant was defending other individuals or himself and that the force that he used was necessary. And ladies and gentlemen, he wasn't defending anybody else. The force was not necessary. It's a sad situation, and I'm going to confront this head on. It would be easy for you all as jurors to say, wait a minute, I don't get it. This is a guy who's got everything. He has everything. He's successful. He's got a beautiful wife. He's got 2 children who were here. And some of you might be saying, gosh, you know what? Why would he risk that? And that's a very good question. It's just not a question that is for you to consider. Because in the end, the issue is not why did he risk it? Why did he do what he did? Because what the evidence shows is that is what he did. This is also not, let me repeat, not about Relly and his civil suit. And let's talk about that for a moment. And let's talk about exactly what we are dealing with here. I want to move forward here. As I'm talking, again, some of you might say, hey, listen, Mr. Lewin, we've been listening to this case. Why are you even up here arguing? We get it. If I were in charge of the court system, which I'm not, I would make an adjustment. And what would happen is there would be a scoreboard right on top of between where juror number 4 and juror number 5 is. And I could look up and I could see, okay, we're up 42-0. I can take a knee, I can run the clock out, but I don't have a scoreboard. I have no idea what you 12 jurors are thinking. I have no idea. I have no idea if some of the crazy arguments by the defense, gosh, maybe somebody believes them. One of the most difficult, frustrating things that can happen is, and I try not to do this, but I will see jurors taking notes, writing things down at certain points where I'm thinking, oh my gosh, why are they writing that? That doesn't make any sense. Of course, I don't know what you're writing. I have no idea. You could be writing down a point, you could be writing down, that doesn't make any sense at all. I have no idea. But here's what I do know. I've got an obligation to make sure that I address everything that the defense has brought up. Good points, bad points, irrelevant points, nonsensical points. I have to address it all because I don't know where each one of you are at. And the reason is pretty simple. There is no way that I can ask you 12 jurors to do your job if I haven't done mine. So that's kind of the background of where we find ourselves. All right, let's talk for a second about the defense closing argument, and I think it's important. So, what they have done, and listen, I get it. Relly, in a lot of ways, was a very problematic victim. Why is he problematic? Well, one, in a lot of ways, he's not very sympathetic. And I'm not here to get you to like Relly, to get you to say, you know what, Relly deserves $30 million. Because unlike what Mr. Takapina said, you're not here to decide that. You are not here. I'm not Relly's lawyer, and you're not the jury who's going to decide what damages he's going to get. Evidence has showed he has a civil suit. You're aware of that. I'm not telling you anything that's not a part of the evidence. And if that civil suit goes to trial, as you all know, there will be a jury that will decide what, if anything, he gets. That is not you 12. I don't mean to shortchange you alternates. Being alternate is a really, I'm not going to lie, it's a crummy job. You get to sit through everything, and then you don't get to vote. I think I said this on Bois I would have held my hand up and said, I cannot be an alternate. I can't do it. I need to be able to vote. So when I say U12, I really mean U16. You never know who is going to end up on our jury. But what is important to keep in mind is that you're not here representing Relly. But you know what I do want to explain? I want to explain for a second what happened with Relly and who he is and what he's been through. And I think it's really important, and this kind of goes to what the defense is in this case. This is a picture that if you look at it, it's very blurry, okay? You can't see what's going on. Why is that? Because what the defense wants to do is they want to zoom up so close on every irrelevant fact that you forget why we're even here. And what's an example of that? I'll tell you right now. Mr. Capapina spent time pointing out the fact that Relly was not honest about buying a property in Miami. Now you need to ask yourselves, what does his property in Miami have to do with what happened on November 6th? Nothing. But he would say, well, but wait a minute. If Relly is not being truthful about that, you don't have to believe about anything. I'm going to get to why that is not what the instructions actually direct you to do. But I want to do something more. I want to do something better. I want to explain to you from the evidence why Relly was up there doing what he did. So let's first talk about the fact that Mr. Capapina spent a lot of time talking about, hey, the defendant, he just sat there, he was dignified, he didn't make any fuss, etc. That's all true. That doesn't mean anything. The defendant is an extremely powerful individual. His wife is even more powerful. Relly found himself in a situation where he was on the wrong side of that power divide. And by the way, it doesn't matter why he got there, but you know why. You heard it. There was a disagreement about ASAP Josh and about what happened to him and what was going to be paid for and what wasn't. And what's important is that Relly and the defendant had a disagreement about it. That's what happened. And because of that disagreement, and because of ego, this is what happened. Now, some of you might be saying to yourselves, well, wait a minute. I mean, in the end, what really happened in this case? Okay, it wasn't a prop gun, obviously. The evidence demonstrates, and by the way, we don't have to prove that Relly got shot. The reasonable inference from the evidence is that he's got a wound on his hand that he didn't have beforehand. I'm going to address this again, but every time you hear the defense say, where was the witness to testify to that? You need to remember something. They are the ones that are arguing that this was a prop gun. They are the ones that are arguing that Relly didn't actually sustain these injuries from a gunshot. They are the ones arguing that casings would not have been found. You've got how many lawyers over there? How many people? There was a point in time during jury selection where they almost had a football huddle. There were like 8 or 9 of them over there. Do you think for one moment, 1 millisecond, that if those individuals had something positive to say to help the defendant, that they would have called those individuals? If, for instance, Relly's injuries could not have been caused by a graze wound, they would have called a witness. So what you're left with is, Relly didn't have that wound when it started. He testified that he felt heat going through his hands instantly. So the idea that, well, it's a minor wound, and that's true. But we're not here to talk about the consequences. I want to really point out something that's really important. This was 10 p.m. on a busy Saturday night in the middle of Hollywood. And what happened? And you know this. Well, I'm going to go through this evidence at length. But the short story is that the defendant, because he was angry, because of ego, because of the fact that he is who he is, he decided that he was going to have a confrontation with Relly. That's what happened. We'll go through the video. It's very clear. The defendant goes there with a gun. He's got two guys with him. He grabs Relly. He initiated this incident. And what I don't think is being addressed enough, and Relly talked about it, is that, remember, Relly has no idea before this is happening. He doesn't think it's this severe of an issue. They've known each other half their lives. They understand they're upset with each other. That's clear. You have to text back and forth. But at that moment, and I'm not talking about when the defendant fires the gun. I'm talking about the parking garage. When the defendant pulls out the gun, Relly's entire future flashes before his eyes. And do you know what that future is? He's done. It's over. What makes it over? Well, he understands that if the defendant is upset with him enough to pull a gun on him, that he's going to ruin him. As he told you, that means no more artists will sign with him. That means record deals will go away. He's done. And he doesn't know this is coming. He doesn't have time to contemplate it. And what's his response? It's shock and it's anger. And it's not really thinking about what is smart. The argument that Mr. Tacopina makes is, well, who would go after somebody who's pulled a gun on them? Well, that's not quite a fair argument, because it's not somebody who's pulled a gun on them. It's someone that was a close friend. And Relly told you he really wasn't thinking about the consequences. He was angry. He also told you that, you know what? Rocky had pulled a gun on him and he put it back. So he realized at that point, his life as he knew it is over. By the way, he was right. So we're not here to talk about what damages Relly should get, what damages he shouldn't get. But let's remember something. That man shot him. That man took away the career that he had. I don't know what that's worth. $30 million sounds a bit excessive to me, but I'm not the lawyer in that trial and you're not the jury. So that will be hashed out, that will be debated, and that will be eventually decided upon. But there's no question that in that moment, he realized that he was losing something very, very important, very precious. And so what does he do? He follows, and we have the second incident. Now, what started the second incident? We'll never know. We know that Relly is yelling at him. Relly is saying very unkind things. And we know there's no question the defendant is proud. Okay? And I'm going to give you another word because I'm not going to hide from it. He's entitled. All right? Everybody runs around. He is a big, important man, and everybody serves him. This is just a small example, but it's important. The witnesses who came in are dependent upon him financially. They're dependent upon him for their careers. And what happened in the middle of a trial with 12 on the stand? 12's asked a question. Has anyone ever seen or heard a defendant yell out to a witness in front of the jury, "Don't answer that"? That's what happens when you have a lot of power. And no one has ever told you, you know what? You can't do that. So why did the defendant, why did he take out the gun and fire those shots? I don't know. But you don't have to figure that out either. Because in the end, and I covered this in jury selection, I asked each one of you, If I prove to you, Mr. Pozlemek and I, if we prove to you what happened in this case, beyond a reasonable doubt, and you don't understand why it happened, it still happened. But that's not where the story ends, because that act, and the first act's important too. When he pulls the gun out, I'm going to go through the video, but it's very clear that that incident ends because a couple of people walk by. That's very clear. There are witnesses. One of the witnesses, I think 12, I believe, even mentioned, yeah, there's people walking by, but that's not what ended it. Well, you can see where they are, and you can see that right after, that's when he puts the gun back. When they get to the second scene, something happens. And one of the things that makes no sense in the defense argument, 0 sense, is that they keep talking about the timing of the shots. Okay? It's not when the first shot was fired, and you're going to see it. You can see, you can't tell what it is, but you can see Rocky make a movement behind his back and pull out a firearm. Pull out, you can't tell what it is, but he's going to pull that item out, and at that point in time, he's going to start advancing to where Relly and Ills are. That is what Relly responds to, is that firearm being pulled out. Yes, he grabs Ills before the first shot is fired because he's trying to avoid getting shot. So again, the timing of which shot it is it 1 second before or after, that's an irrelevancy. It doesn't matter. It's not even the defense theory. And the other thing that is really, really important, and again, I'm going to call it out, I'm not going to hide behind it. That man decided that his ego and his vendetta and his anger at Relly was important enough that he was going to risk not only Relly's life or Ill's life, but he was going to fire 2 shots from a 9mm firearm in the middle of Hollywood. Now, I don't have to tell you, because you all know it's common sense. Bullets travel until they hit something. That's what happens. They're fired at very, very high velocity. They're coming out at an incredible speed. And they travel until they hit something. Sometimes what they hit is the ground. And they ricochet. Sometimes what they hit is a car. Sometimes what they hit is the person they're aimed at. And sometimes some tourist walking down Hollywood Boulevard with her family all of a sudden drops dead because they've been shot in the head by a bullet that somebody selfishly fired to settle a childish dispute. That's what he did. That's the conduct in this case. It's not about what injury Relly received. It's not about how much money he's going to sue for. Those are not in the jury instructions. You're not going to see a jury instruction on, quote, extortion. Because that's not what you're here to decide. That's what happened in this case. That man decided, you know what? I'm angry. And I'm going to show him. The defense argument, as I listened, it was almost like Mr. Tacopina took off in a plane with no flight plan. And he flew around in circles. Circle after circle after circle. And eventually, he kind of just ran out of gas and kind of just crashed the plane. There wasn't much direction. There wasn't much focus. And there wasn't an emphasis on the actual facts you're here to decide. Now listen, he's got a tough case. In opening statement, my partner got up here and he told me this is a simple case. It is a simple case. I'm going to tell you, this case could and easily could be a 5-minute verdict. And here's why. Because once you decide that this was not a prop gun, and ladies and gentlemen, it's not a prop gun. I'm going to go through all the reasons. And once you decide that, this case is done. It's over. Because that's the defense in the case. Not, as Mr. Tacopina tried to argue, well, it's self-defense. If you notice, Mr. Tacopina didn't actually reach the next step. He talked about self-defense, but he never explained to you, for it to be self-defense, you have to find that it was a real gun. That's what you have to find. If you have a question about that, you ask the court. You have to find, to get to self-defense, that it was a real gun. And their defense in this case was, it was a prop gun. That's the issue in this case. Was it a prop gun or was it not? If you find it's a prop gun, all I can say is, you know what? You really need to examine why you're getting there. And I'm going to bring up something that's really important. The defendant is a celebrity. His wife's an even bigger celebrity. Many of you know who they are. They brought in 2 adorable children yesterday for closing argument. Now, they haven't been here at any other time. And you have to ask yourselves, those kids have a right to be there. Why children that age would be here in a situation like this, don't know. But you have to ask yourselves, am I going to let my feelings of not wanting to convict the defendant? And Mr. Tacopina made it very clear. If you noticed in closing today, he literally brought up Rihanna, he brought up the defendant's family, and he basically was saying, hey, listen, if you convict him, it's going to be very difficult on the family. That is not something you are allowed to consider. So I'm not telling you I don't think you should consider it. You are not allowed to consider it. If you think you are allowed to consider it, ask the question of the judge when you go back. You can send out notes. You can ask questions. You are not allowed to consider how this might affect Rihanna or his kids. And there's a very simple reason. We are all in the world responsible for what we do. And I'm going to add something else too. There was testimony from ASAP Lou. And ASAP Lou, even though it wasn't a question, ASAP Lou wanted to get in front of you, I think 2 times at a minimum, that the defendant is looking at 24 years in prison. The defendant is looking at whatever Judge Arnold decides he is going to give him. So you are not allowed, by the way, to consider, oh my gosh, if I convict, you can get 24 years. You're not allowed to consider, even if that was true. But in the end, Judge Arnold will decide what the sentence in this case is. So if any of you go back there and say, well, you know what, I just don't think that this crime, I'm just not comfortable with 24 years, you can't do that. If one of the rest of you does it, guys, it's misconduct. You can't do it. You got to stop yourself, you got to stop the person next to you, you got to say, you know what, we can't do that. All right, you've got to base your decision on this case on the facts that have been proved from the evidence. Now, this is really important. The instruction does not say on the facts that have been proved from the people's evidence. That is hugely important in this case. There is no question whatsoever that our case got immeasurably stronger because the defense chose to put on a case. No question. Even if some of you were saying to yourselves, you know what, I don't think based on just what the prosecution put on that I would have convicted. And let's think about that for a second. Until the defense case, now they mentioned an opening, but remember, opening is not evidence. Until the defense case, we don't know what the defense is. It could have been self-defense. It could have been any number of things. It wasn't. They chose to put on a defense. They didn't have to. You remember in voir dire, I asked you all, are you going to give any points to the defense if they choose to put on a defense in their case when they don't have to? Or are you going to look at their evidence as critically, as importantly as you do for our evidence? You all said you would do it. They elected to put on a defense that killed their case. It destroyed it. And I'll go through it. It started with Wally. The best evidence from the victim. This is probably the second thing I agree with Mr. Tacopina. Mr. Tacopina put on Wally to impeach the defendant. No, I'm sorry, to impeach the victim on an issue of whether it was his voice. And obviously, it was Relly's voice. And obviously, he was uncooperative. But let's take a step back and ask ourselves, why was Relly uncooperative in this case? Relly told you, and you saw evidence of it, in April of 2022, when it came out that Relly was the individual who reported the defendant to the police, he's facing death threats. His family is facing death threats. So he is up there not wanting to answer any question about his family. He doesn't even want to give his girlfriend's name. He doesn't want to say where he lives. He doesn't want to identify anything about Miami. You got to ask yourselves, first of all, is it understandable why he didn't want to answer those questions? Of course it is. You have to ask yourselves, Mr. Tacopina repeatedly asked those questions. Listen, that's his right as a lawyer. He can certainly do that. But it was very clear that the result of that, if not the intention, was to get Relly upset, to get him agitated, and to shut him down. And that's what happened. But even more importantly, none of those questions, none of those answers matter. And what's amazing is the defense, their witness, they put on the evidence from Wally, which is some of the most crucial evidence in the case. And again, I'm going to get there. So, the defense had no obligation to put on a case. They could have done nothing. But do not be mistaken. Some jurors go back and they say, you know what? Well, because if I only look at the people's case, they haven't proven it beyond a reasonable doubt. That's why this says, prove from the evidence, not prove from the people's evidence, all of the evidence in the case. So, we've got a duty, and we don't hide behind it at all. We have a duty to prove the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And by the way, it's interesting. Mr. Tacopina keeps talking about, quote, reasonable doubts. There's no such thing as reasonable doubts. They are not individual pieces. Reasonable doubt is an overall view from all of the evidence. So when he says, well, listen, if you have a reasonable doubt about Relly's credibility, then that means it's a not guilty. That's not true at all. The question is, when you look at all of the evidence, if you find that Relly's credibility is really material, if you find that there isn't other evidence that overcomes it, does the overall collection of the evidence cause you to have a reasonable doubt? There is no such thing as reasonable doubts. They are not like pieces of a cookie where you pick up one and go, here's a reasonable doubt. Here, it's not how it works. And you got the instruction that shows it. We have to prove every element of the crimes charged. No question, that's our burden. But this is really important. Not every element in every case is in dispute or reasonably in dispute. So what does that mean? So for instance, we would have had to prove that it was the defendant who was at the scene. That's our burden. But the defense has already conceded that. We would have had to prove that the defendant had a gun. They've already conceded he had a gun. They say it's a prop gun. We would have had to concede, we would have had to prove, that the defendant assaulted Relly with the gun. Well, they've conceded that. They just say it was a prop gun. We don't have to prove whatsoever that the defendant shot Relly, although that's what the evidence demonstrates. So very little in this case is in dispute, and that is hugely important. So let's talk about the relevant evidence in this case. So the day before the shooting, November 5th, 2021, Relly's in a car with Juror. And again, I got to talk about Barty for a second, ASAP Barty. The defense is saying, well, why didn't you bring Barty in to us? Barty is the guy, if you remember, who posted, who is calling Relly a rat or a snitch. I can't remember which it is right now. The people's position is that Barty is not credible. If the defense wanted to bring him in, if they thought that he had evidence to add to their case, they would have brought him in. They flew in a guy from France, okay? Let's just take a step back. They flew in an individual from France at tremendous expense on almost no notice. And they flew him in because they wanted to prove that that was Relly's voice on the tapes. Now, one has to ask themselves, did they listen to the tapes? Because the tapes are some of the best evidence we have in this case. And you know that they only played for you a little snippet. I'm going to play the whole first part of that call, uninterrupted. I'm not going to give a snippet. So what happened in this case? Day before the shooting, there's an issue between the two of them. Okay? The defendant is upset with Relly. That's not in dispute. He's upset with him. I have no idea whether Relly was right about this dispute or the defendant was right about the dispute. But here's what I know for sure. It does not matter. It's not an issue for you to even consider. Let's assume that Relly paid for every part of ASAP Josh's funeral. Okay? The most expensive funeral in the history of mankind. He paid $20 million for the funeral. Let's assume that happened. It doesn't change the fact that he can't assault him with a firearm. I don't know. We have no idea who was right on this. But it's very clear it doesn't matter. But what's important is there is a dispute. And by the way, if that call did not take place, do you believe for a second that they would not have brought ASAP Barty in? And what do you think would have been the response for the defense if we would have brought ASAP Barty in, and ASAP Barty would have lied the same way that Twelby lied, and Wally lied, and ASAP Lou lied? So, he's his close friend. If that guy was going to help him, they would have called him. And they have the power of the subpoena just like we do. And in fact, he's the defendant's friend. They know where he is. They're able to access him. So the fact that he's not here, do not get caught up in that game. But, again, the relevance of this is simply that they had a dispute the day before. And the defendant, who is clearly a proud individual, got embarrassed by the fact that Relly is hearing him talking about him behind his back. Which, let's face it, it's not very manly, okay? It's just not. And it's clear that the defendant is embarrassed by this. He's embarrassed by the fact that Relly knows he is talking about him behind his back. And Relly doesn't like it, clearly. So, this is the day before the shooting. You can see what's going on. I'm not going to repeat the language. This is what we have. And by the way, at this point in time, this is a stupid little incident, okay? The man's a multi-millionaire. why on earth is he going to take it to the level that he took it? I don't know, but that's exactly what he did. So what happens? Well, the day of the shooting, we know that Relly is receiving a bunch of calls from the defendant, from Ills, and from Twelby. And if you don't think that Ills and Twelby know what's going on, I got a bridge to sell you. Okay? If you think, as the defense argued, that those were credible witnesses, Relly was angry and he was hostile. They weren't angry or hostile. They were just liars. Start to finish. So what happens? Well, we know shortly before the shooting, let's get to it, stop ducking my calls. Now, by the way, Relly says, hey, listen, I'm not really sure what's going to happen. And when you look at it, it looks like they're going to have a disagreement. But this is really important. Relly can kick the defendant's ass all day, okay? That's clear. But if Relly does that, he loses his life. He doesn't have any interest in doing that. He knows it, the defendant knows it, everybody knows it. Even those lying witnesses, Twelby and Lou, eventually had to concede that the defendant has a lot of power in the industry. The industry where Relly works, the industry that he is dependent upon for his livelihood. So he's got not only no motivation for getting into a fight with the defendant, he can't do it. He's got to sit back and take whatever he's going to take. Because he's power. That's who he is. He's got power. There's Rocky and there's Relly. Rocky knows it and Relly knows it. That's just the facts of life. So what happens? We have this incident. Now, thank God we have video in this case. Okay? Because without video, we'd all be in trouble. This video is very clear. And when Relly is walking, there's a couple things you want to consider. I'm going to get to this again. The idea that the defendant is bringing a gun to this meeting makes no sense at all. He's got two guys with him. He's not afraid of Relly. Relly's not looking for a fight. And you're going to see that the first action is the defendant grabbing Relly. That's what you're going to see as they're walking up. And I have this is slowed down so you can see. So what you saw, the defendant grabs his arm. Now the defendant is pushing him forward. Relly is holding him back. Now this is really important. Stop it for a minute, please. Do you mind stopping it for a minute? So this is really important. Some stuff in the trial is almost funny. I would ask Twelby, so what was the weather like of that night? Man, it was cold. And Relly, he's huge. He's got muscles all over his body. They made Relly out to be the Hulk. They made that happen because that's the narrative they wanted to create. But the problem with it is if you watch, Relly clearly is stronger than Rocky is. He's stronger than Ills is. Yet he's letting Rocky push him back. If he had wanted to, he had his hand available to punch Rocky. He didn't do it. Probably not because he didn't want to. Because he's a grown man who understands that if he does that, it's over. He's got no career. He's done. What he doesn't understand is that in the next moment, Rocky's going to take out a gun and Relly is going to realize, oh my God, it's over anyway. Please play it. So you want to stop it. Stop. I don't know if you remember, but when I had Twelby on cross-examination, and he is saying that he's trying to pull the Relly off of Rocky. And I think this same image, and I'm asking him, well, wait a minute, how are you trying to pull Relly off of Rocky when you're in the middle? You're trying to keep Rocky off of Relly. No, I'm not in the middle. Of course he's in the middle. Keep playing it. And now watch the gun. Stop. It is true, we do not see the gun come out. But we know from before that the gun was not in Rocky's hand because we saw his hand before. Now, if you remember, what was Twelby's version of how the gun came out? I mean, guys, I'm not making this up. He said that Relly lifts Rocky off the ground. His pants fall down, and Relly reaches back to pull his pants up and happens to end up with the gun and what looks like his finger on the trigger. That is more absurd than, again, the tornado example with Boomer. It's absurd. It insults your intelligence. And the only value that it has is if you are going to try to find a way to let this man get away with what he's done. And this goes back to what your duty is. You're here to call balls and strikes. What happens to Rocky is not your responsibility. Not whatsoever. Your responsibility is determining what happened. It's almost like what an umpire does, okay? When an umpire calls a strike or calls a ball, he doesn't own what happens in the game. The players decide the game. He's just making the calls according to the rules. Do not be fooled into the idea that, quote, Rocky's life is in your hands. Rocky's life is not in your hands. The determination of what Rocky did is. And what happens from there, that's on him, and that's up to the judge. So what happens? So he's got the gun out. Continue to play, please. Stop. So if he was trying to put the gun back, why is the gun now from behind him to in front of him? So they're going to say, well, you don't see what he does with the gun. Well, if his gun fell out accidentally, why doesn't he put it back? Well, it's because it didn't fall out accidentally. He pulled it out, and now he's going to assault Relly with it. And the fact that you don't see the assault because of the cameras, ask yourselves, logically, he took the gun out. He switched hands. The gun is now in front of him. What's he doing with the gun? He's doing exactly what Relly said he was doing with it. Now, by the way, nobody said that the defendant tried to murder Relly, intended to murder Relly. You're not charged with that. So the gun comes out. Continue to play. Stop. Okay, now, if you notice, he's about to put the gun back. And you're going to see the people crossing because, keep playing. So the gun went back because you see the people that are on top? They are walking from the direction where Rocky just was. Now, why Rocky put that gun away, we're never going to know. I can't prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt why he put the gun away. No one can. I can tell you that the evidence suggests, clearly, it's undisputed, there's a couple of people walking right by. It's in the middle of Hollywood, and Rock's a pretty famous person, and if he was planning on shooting the gun at that point in time, that would really seem to be an ill-advised place to do it. But you have to ask yourself, do you think it's a coincidence that when Rocky ends up actually shooting the gun, that the gun is shot in a place where Rocky reasonably, doesn't believe anybody's watching him. He doesn't know about the cameras. He knows there's a crowd of people here. Can you play, please? So this is how the first incident ends. Okay? This is how it ends. So, when we're looking at this, that's count one. That's the assault with a firearm. That's the personal use of the firearm. We don't have to prove any more than what you've just seen. Now, we do have to prove that it's a real gun. And here's what's interesting. Why are we unable to determine definitively? We certainly have strong evidence that it's a real gun based on what happens in the next scene. But who is in control of that gun? And let's think about what the argument is. They're saying that's a prop gun. Where's the prop gun? How are we supposed to prove that it's not a prop gun when they've got the gun and they got rid of it? It's impossible. There's no way for us to do anything more than what we've done. So what happens at the next scene? Part two of this. Now this is going to be important because what you're going to see here is you're going to see that the incident starts before Relly ever grabs Ills. By the way, Ills is the guy he likes. He doesn't like 12-8. So you want to just ask yourself for a second. He never tells anybody, hey, Ills had a gun, Ills had a knife. Here's why I assaulted Ills. He's not assaulting Ills. He's not punching him. He's not doing anything to Ills. He's using Ills as a shield, just like he's going to say. But let's look up to the top left corner what's going to happen. Oh, did I lose it? Okay. So here we go. Back it up again. Start this one over. So when you're watching this, what you're going to see is not as the defense described, that Relly grabs Ills and then Rocky defends him. What you're going to see is Rocky is going to reach behind and then he's going to advance towards Relly. That is clearly when Relly sees the firearm, and that's when he ends up grabbing Ills. So the idea that, well, the gunshot doesn't happen until after he grabs Ills. It doesn't matter. Relly's responding to the fact that Rocky's pulled a gun on him for the second time. And by the way, this is a lot scarier than the first time. Because now they're by themselves, and clearly Relly is concerned he's about to get shot. Now, I'm going to get to it, I'm going to address it, but this doesn't even begin to cover the idea that their defense is not just this was a prop gun, which is absurd. It's an absurd defense. Their defense is it's a prop gun, and Relly knew it was a prop gun. And even though Relly knew it was a prop gun, Rocky pulled it on him to scare him, even though, by their own admission, he knows it's fake. And you can see Relly running around, and you can see what 12 does, and you can see what Rocky does, and no one is acting like it's a prop gun because it isn't. So let's watch it. Boom, guns out. By the way, at one point in time, one of the witnesses, I think it was 12, he said that the defendant fired a warning shot. You don't fire a warning shot with a prop gun, it doesn't fire anything. Also, you can see that on that shot, the defendant has the gun out, facing forward, appearing to target Relly. And by the way, he moves into a better position in between the shots. And the only reasonable conclusion you can reach from that is that he is trying to get a line of fire onto Relly. Relly didn't suffer the minor injury because the defendant didn't try to shoot him. He suffered the minor injury because he used ills as a shield, and for whatever reason, the defendant didn't hit him. And Lee didn't hit him other than in his hand. But the idea that you need to look at the gunshot and the fact that Relly is already grabbing ills as a shield, that's just misleading. It just doesn't work. I'm going to play this now in half speed. Oh, this is going to be the same. And the idea, by the way, that that 12E is running away because Relly is trying to attack him is absurd. If you knew nothing, all you saw was this video and somebody told you, hey, listen, that's a fake gun, and everybody knows it's a fake gun, you would go, well, wait a minute. If it's a fake gun, why is everybody running around? Why is Relly grabbing ills as a shield? Why is 12E running away? By the way, how does this incident end? This incident ends not because the defendant voluntarily says it's over. 12E literally is blocking him and pushing him away. The defendant is fired up. He's angry. We don't know what was going to happen next, but it's not as if the defendant decided on his own, you know what, I'm done. 12E pushes him away. So this is the close-up. And again, this is a little bit harder. This is going to be played at half speed. I got it. It's going to be played at half speed. Again, we already know that we've got... By the way, the only thing that Mr. Tacopina did not accuse Relly of was planting the nail on the seat. And I was waiting for it. I was waiting for him to say, Relly planted the nail. He was trying to get me. So, we know who we have. Defendant, 12E, and we've got, which is hard to see, we've got Relly and ills. So what happens? You watch for yourself. You're going to see Relly reach and then move. When Relly reaches and moves, when the defendant reaches and moves, that's when the gun is out. Whoops. Sorry. There we go. So here we go. Boom. You see him reach, guns out. 12E moves. Relly is running, trying to get behind ills. He's not beating ills. And what is Rocky doing? He's running around, trying to get a shot, and he's going to fire. And when he fires a second time, the gun is outstretched, aiming at Relly. And now look. There's 12E grabbing him and making the defendant go away. That's how this thing ends. Again, and I understand it. You guys don't want to believe that this man who has everything, is going to give it all up for this. I get it. But that's a decision he made. I didn't make it for him. You didn't make it for him. The judge didn't. Mr. Tacopina didn't. He made that decision on November 6th. And what's crazy is that apparently Relly would have been more than willing to take the money and not cooperate with anybody. And by the way, why is that? Do you think that if you are in the hip-hop rap community, that going to the police and filing a case against A$AP Rocky is going to help your career? It's done. When Rocky was saying, and you heard it before, hey, I'd be on the beach, he would have been on the beach. So not only did the defendant commit this violent crime, but in the end, his attitude was, no, I'm not giving you anything. Now, that's arrogant, but it's what happened. And I want to make sure that no matter how successful he is, how famous his wife is, how cute his kids are, how much they giggle here during closing arguments, that you guys are not going to say, you know what? We're going to give him a little extra. He needs to be treated like you would treat any other person. Because in the end, that's all that he is entitled to. He doesn't get to be the big celebrity in a jury trial. He's a defendant like anyone else. Okay, so what happens after the shooting? Immediately, Relly understands what's going on. So we had, this was very interesting, we had the officers called, and the whole idea is, we know that this incident never happened, meaning it was only a fake gun because they didn't find the casings. But what became very clear, ladies and gentlemen, is the defense did not realize until we called our witness, started questioning Lewin. They did not realize, it turns out that the prop gun, which was apparently a 9mm prop gun using 9mm ammunition, prop ammunition, is going to have the same brass, maybe lighter, but it's going to eject the casing the same way a real 9mm does, because as Lewin told you, and I think as Twelby told you, who knows less about guns, the point of those prop guns is they're supposed to look realistic. And if they don't eject the casing, they're not realistic. And any of you who've ever seen a firearm, any semi-automatic firearm, understands that in order for a second shot to be fired, unless you're going to manually take a round out and put it in, which you don't do in a semi-automatic, it's got a chamber and cycle around. That's what it does. They didn't realize that. So what happened is they spent a bunch of time talking about the incredible investigation that the LAPD officer did on the scene. I asked you during voir dire, are you going to be able, in this case, are you going to be able, if you don't have every question answered, to come to a verdict if the evidence demonstrates to you beyond a reasonable doubt that the case has been proven? Each one of you said, no, you know what, I don't need every question answered. Let me tell you a question we can't answer. I cannot tell you why LAPD did not find the casings that night. Don't know. They certainly looked. But here's what we know. They didn't find any casings. Meaning, if the defendant's position is correct, if the defense position was the prop gun is correct, there should have been casings there for the prop gun. They weren't. And what we know is, Lewin went back and he found them. And I'm going to go through and explain to you why that's credible evidence. So what happens? He goes back, he texts, and he says, hey, you tried to kill me. Okay? What are you talking about? Why are you telling people I shot at you? That's what the defendant says. By the way, the defendant's position now, their defense is that he shot at him, it was just a prop gun. So the question isn't that the defendant is lying here. He clearly is lying. He's just saying, oh no, it's a prop gun. So, Relly says, you tried to set me up and take me from my daughter. He is saying, you tried to kill me. That night, in that text, Relly doesn't know we're going to trial. And what's the defendant's response? Not, hey, that was a prop gun. It's stop making shit up. So, this is what they say is the big evidence in this case. Yes, Relly decided that rather than cooperating with the police, he was going to try to get a bunch of money. Is that the honorable thing to do? Is that the good civic-minded thing to do? Of course not. Because the defendant firing his gun in the middle of Hollywood jeopardized everybody. It's not just a crime against Relly, it's a crime against us all. But Relly didn't care about that. And by the way, eventually, when there's a civil trial, I'm sure that the civil lawyers will be arguing that Relly doesn't deserve anything. But luckily, that's not my job. We don't represent Relly. We represent the people of the state of California, and we're here because the defendant committed a violent crime. We're not here asking for money for him. And I'm not going to sit up here and tell you what he deserves. I have no idea. So, what's important here is he's explaining in this text that he wants to get the money, but he's explaining why. He shot at me. Relly never, ever, ever has been inconsistent in the fact that the defendant shot him, that he got hit. Never. Sure, was he not upfront about owning property in Miami? Some of the questions: how did you make money in 2021? Is this a picture of your girlfriend? Imagine if you are sitting here on a case that is being live streamed. You got the camera here. You've already been threatened. Your family's been threatened. Your daughter's been threatened. Your girlfriend's been threatened. And now someone is going to ask the defense attorney, what's your girlfriend's name? Let me show you a picture of her for the world to see. What do you expect Relly to do? Okay, now we're going to get to the most important statement that Relly gives in this case. And let me tell you why it's so important. And again, some of you might be asking yourselves, why did the defense bring in this evidence? And let's be clear. When the defense says, well, we only brought Wally out here to testify to one thing, that's true. They easily could have played the call. There's no magic form where we got to play and they don't. They're arguing that Relly is inconsistent.
The objection could not play that whole role.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. What was around?
The entire call.
We played
by the defense.
Oh, no, that's what I'm saying. The defense could have played the entire call. They didn't.
That was the objection.
Objection sustained. Go on to something else.
So we decided that we were going to play the entire call. And you can listen to this call. And let me tell you what's so important about the call. Relly does not have any idea that he is being recorded. He's not talking to cops. He's not talking to a prosecutor. He's talking to someone who he thinks is his friend. Now, that person isn't actually his friend. That person is an agent of Rocky. How do we know he's an agent of Rocky? Well, we know it for a couple of reasons. One, and again, this is how just lack of credibility filled Wally's testimony. Wally says that basically he just happened to record him. And when I'm asking, wait, why are you recording him? Well, he had like 10 missed calls from me. Well, wait a minute. So your friend, you have 10 missed calls, you decide I'm going to record his call. He recorded him because he was trying to get information to help Rocky. And you know that because what does he admit that he did right afterwards? He calls Rocky and tells him what he said. But here's what's incredible. When you listen, I'm going to play it. Wally's testimony was he knew nothing about this incident before this phone call. Yet, you're going to hear him say, I'm not here to pick sides. So that's a straight lie. Of course he knew about it. He's Rocky's good friend. It's already been in the media. It's been blown up in hip-hop websites. Of course he knows about it. And when you listen, what is so crucial about this statement is this is Relly live, not in a courtroom, not to a police officer, to a friend where he's got no motive to make up anything, where he's explaining what happened. And he is literally incredulous. When you listen to this, what's going on is Wally is trying to get him to try to settle this thing for money. That's what's going on when you listen. And Relly's like, hey, I tried to settle it for money. He didn't want to do it. But in terms of the facts of what happened, he is crystal clear and consistent about everything that matters. So listen.
acting, bro, then, you know, I'm not trying to pick sides and shit. I'm mad at both y'all niggas for letting that shit happen, you feel me?
Oh, it ain't no picking sides. That nigga 100% crazy and wrong.
Yeah.
100% wrong. And he got 12-year ills mixed up, bro. I'm not. You gotta understand, Raggy been on his high horse for a very long time, you feel me? He didn't have to do what he did. I don't have, he forced my hand, you feel me? I got over 20 missed calls between him, ills. Why is Rocky going out his way to do anything like that? You get what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure you didn't hear the story or whatever it is. But you gotta look at it like this. Why is he going out his way to call me 20 times? Got ills and 12 you with him. Text messages saying link up, where you at? And all of this is because of I pressed him about Josh, him not doing right by Josh, and he spoke to Josh's mom and lied. You get what I'm saying? So I wrote him about that. He hits up Bari later about that, but I'm with Bari. Bari got the phone on speaker. You get what I'm saying? This shit didn't fit well with me. So Rocky talks about me within that conversation because he sees I text him about Josh. You feel me? Told him taking ASAP out my name. This was 7 months ago. I took ASAP out my name. You feel me?
Yeah.
He's a bitch, so he goes in and hit Bari because Bari an influencer. A whole week later, doing that complex con shit. You feel what I'm saying? Just so happened I'm with Bari while Rocky hits her. Rocky says my name. You get what I'm saying? Real Money, 12-year ills is at his house. I hit Real Money the next morning, tell Real Money. I heard Rocky bitch ass tell him I don't fuck with him, whoop-de-woo, 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 you feel me? No fighting words, none of that, just basically, nigga, I heard you. But in Rocky's head, he was like a bitch because Bari had him on speaker. Rocky don't know who else heard that conversation, but he know I heard him talk about me, and I told Rocky over the years, nigga, if you have a problem with me, let me know, stop rocking me to sleep, you feel me? Boom, boom, boom. Next thing you know, I guess that was enough for him. He felt like a bitch because he knew I heard that conversation. I was supposed to hear that conversation because Rocky never, ever, I never heard him say curse words or even have that type of energy towards me. You know what I'm saying? So now I know the real him. I tell Real Money, tell that nigga fuck him. You feel me? Boom, boom, boom. Shit gets related to him. Next thing you know, I get over 20, 30 missed calls between him, Ills, and Rocky. Text messages. I'm staying at the Lowe's. I tell him, he calls me, I finally answer because I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
I answered it, he's like, where you at? With a slip voice. I'm like, huh? Where you at? Nigga, I'm at the W, but I'm not really at the Lowe's, you feel me? And if you know Hollywood Boulevard, they all look the same. You're like, no you're not, nigga, that's a bum-ass hotel. I'm like, huh? He said, show me outside. Okay, all of it look the same. I showed him outside. What he does, be there in 5 minutes. I'm like, alright, my girl like, what the fuck is going on? I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. He calls me, those calls me. Yeah, I got all these text messages, bro, these niggas is dumb. You and a couple only people who heard this story. Rocky out here thinking it's all sweet, but his life is really, and bro,
that's what I wanted to ask you, bro. Like, why the boys though? You feel me? Why take it to you know the guys? You feel me?
Who, me?
Yeah, they know how the boys meet.
Why wouldn't I, bro? He's a multi-millionaire. He blamed at me. I'm no longer on his level. Everybody turned on me. Everybody. Rocky had everybody turn on me that day. Plus, what the fuck am I doing? Spin on his block and go shoot him up? Or do I cripple him? Because he's a multi-millionaire, bro. I'm not having nobody shoot at me where I'm taking him on the chin. And two, I'm not about to spin on Rocky's block. I'm already a millionaire, nigga. You get what I'm saying?
So what you looking for? You think
you're a black nigga? I'm teaching niggas everything, how to get money, how to do this. Do Rocky do that? Do you have a foundation for black people? Do we have a foundation for anybody? No, this nigga's greed. You get what I'm saying? So I can't sit here and be like, oh, how you meet somebody like that, bro? You take away what they have, dogs. You feel what I'm saying? I'm not doing it on something like this, that, and the third, or some pokey shit, nigga. I would have had a guy a lawyer the same day, because he reared at me 4 or 5 times. I had to use ills as a shield, or I'd be dead.
I feel niggas ain't trying to, like, you feel me? You not trying to end squash this shit, get some paper or something, or what, you know? Like,
bro, it's too late. He told me suck a dick. Boom, boom, boom. I end up John the same day. Bro, that's all on him. He had nothing but time, bro. When I got the best lawyer in LA and what about my business? You feel me? He told John to stop contacting me. I sent him the picture of the bullets, sent him the text messages of him, letting him know how serious this is. You know what he said? Nigga, trying to kill me. So that's what he gotta reap. You feel me?
There ain't no way niggas could squat, like, you feel me? No paper, no nothing, bro. Like, you feel me? Like,
bro, he's a grown, he's 33 years old. He got other things talking for him. He know what he did. You get what I'm saying? He had more than enough time. This shit happened 7 months later. He wasn't trying to reach out to me. He still didn't reach out to me.
with legal shit involved now, boys, you know, so.
That's on him. I didn't even want to go about that way. I went ahead and got a lawyer. When you get a lawyer, that has nothing to do with boys. And Jabari is his friend. He might as well thank him for him not being late in the feud, because those are allegations. You feel me? He got enough, and you're part of the PR team. He would have had enough people to block that if Jabari didn't say nothing, bro. Those are allegations. Jabari made it official.
Yeah, so what's the next, bro?
And Jabari's getting sued too. Jabari's getting sued for defamation of character.
Cause everybody look bad, bro. You know, I'm just trying to.
He was bad. He did that, bro. I didn't call you. I didn't have a gun. He left this Hollywood house. Right? Everybody saying everybody looks bad. Everybody points the finger because if I take, bro, I got Hollywood. I got so many people.
Niggas grew up together, bro. Niggas grew up
That's why
together, bro.
niggas hanging. He's in a mansion. Nigga, I paid my way around him every single time. That's him. He uses niggas. He used 12 year ills, nigga. That was the whole joke about the whole shit with Barbie and the whole game. You know what I'm saying? The nigga asked his Barbie, is he coming to the complex car? Nigga, Barbie laughs at him like, nigga, you're not using me. Nigga, the next conversation went about how he got 12 and ills on his jet or some whole shit.
Cause y'all niggas grew up together, man. Like, you feel me? Like,
I made that nigga. Fuck growing up. I made that nigga. Not no 12, not no jams. He ain't no jams. Jams popped up at my crib doing purple swag. I made that nigga. That's why he feel like that, bro. I've been powerful. I've been that. Jabari never did, bro. I put every last one on that.
I just want y'all niggas to kind of end this shit and, you know, find out.
And he ended it when he shot at me. Who ends anything when a nigga shoot at you 4 or 5 times? You gotta grab another member to protect yourself. He called me out my living space. Called me, told me stop ducking him. He planned it. That's called premeditated, bro. You feel what I'm saying? He didn't give me a chance. He told me I'm coming to come down. I came to link him to see what the fuck the status was about. He pulls out. He tries to chest bump me. He tries to chest bump me and then pull out a gun for self-defense. He's a pussy boy. And me and Ills is standing in between while he's trying to shoot me. He didn't give me no seconds. Bro, shit happened like that. And I got it all on camera. You don't want that, like, trust me. You stupid. He did it all on camera, champ. So the world looking at me because of Barry's mouth right now, but in a few seconds, if I wanted to do an HBO or do anything, his whole career is fucked. Everybody's looking at me like the man.
That's what I like what's your, I guess what's the end game here, bro? Like, you feel me?
The end game, I'm suing this shit out of him. That was my game, and regardless, I don't give a fuck about no police, nigga. I'm going against a multi-millionaire that's trying to kill me.
So, it's really against paper, bro, or you just trying to move on and shit?
Besides suing somebody like that. You feel me? Now, he gotta face the consequences of with that because he wanted to be a gangster and run out his crib like that. That has nothing to do with me. You feel me? I did my part. If you look at it on my end, what else am I supposed to do?
I mean, like, watch that shit in the streets type shit last night.
It ain't no street nigga. Bro, what the fuck?
I feel, bro.
You know who my family is? This ain't no street nigga. They ain't got 3 or 4 bodyguards, bro. Come on, don't do that.
Yeah, I feel you, bro.
Don't do that. Don't do that. This man riding around with, come on. What street shit do he do, bro? This is a street nigga. You already know what would happen. Everybody know what happened. We're talking about ASAP Rocky, bro. The face of Dior, like, come on, stop it. I'm saying this shit there.
Nah, I'm just trying to, you know, I'm just, cause I fuck with you with every bro, you know, it's always love every time, nigga, and I fuck with you.
I'm trying to let people know, and the ones who's close by him, this ain't no, he ain't no gangster, real doing, bro, this ain't no gangster. If this was a gangster, this would be handled in the streets.
So how niggas
They
like,
got 3 or 4 bodyguards with him 24/7.
and like, what's next though, bro? Like, niggas go to court, you feel me? Like, why not just watch this shit?
He's finished.
Why not just ask for the bag or, you know?
I tried already, bro, and you don't ask for the bag because that's extortion, bro. When you got somebody that's shooting at you, you ever look like, I'm smart, bro. You gotta understand, I'm not a dumb black nigga, bro. You know what I'm saying? You ask for a bag without a lawyer, bro, it's called extortion. You feel me? You gotta do everything accordingly. Everything accordingly, or it's gonna catch up with you.
All right, folks, this time take 10 minutes. In your argument, Mr. Lewin, you made reference to Rihanna being in the courtroom and the kids being in the courtroom. The manner in which you did it, I don't think was improper. However, for the balance of your argument, from here on out, there is to be no mention of Rihanna being in the courtroom or the kids being in the courtroom.
Just them not being in the courtroom, but I can mention, here's the problem, Your Honor. The defense got up at the end of the court, and they talked about the impact of this case on Rihanna.
I said in the courtroom.
Oh, so just don't mention it in the
Do
courtroom.
not mention again Rihanna being in the courtroom or the babies being in the courtroom. There should be no mention of that again.
Right, I'm just trying to understand, but I can mention the issue, just not talking about being in the courtroom.
Mr. Tacopina went into that.
Okay.
You're entitled to.
I wasn't
No
trying to-
mention
I
of
wasn't
them
trying
being
to
in the
argue a
court.
court. I just wanted to understand what we were asking.
There should be no mention.
We'll do it.
All right, let's bring in the jury.
Yeah. Try to be very, very careful.
So that was the key evidence in this case regarding Relly. Could not have been more plain in what he said. Could not have been more credible regarding the issues that matter. And what are the issues that matter? The defendant shot him. The defendant brought a gun, a real gun, to the scene. What's interesting is that it's very clear, and you heard the testimony from Wally. Wally said he was, quote, mediating, which, please. At one point in time, what you heard him say, he changed the word, which my agents gave me. Also, I'll think of it in a second. This is what happens when you get on the north. Mitigating, thank you. Later on, he said no, he was trying to mitigate. Sometimes that's called a gaffe. A gaffe is something that you don't mean to say, but which turns out to be true. He was trying to mitigate for Rocky. And how do you know? Because he called Rocky immediately afterward. And then he's saying, I don't remember what Rocky said. I couldn't tell you. Why is he calling him? Why is he taping this? And why during this call, repeatedly, he is telling Relly, ask for a bag, meaning ask for money. Relly's telling him, I asked for money. He doesn't want to give it to me. Wally continually says, hey, basically, why are you taking it to the guys? Why take it to the boys? Meaning, why'd you bring the cops into it? He is doing the bidding for the defendant. And what's amazing, and again, it's not right, but the defendant, according to Relly, could have eliminated this whole situation by simply taking care of it with Relly. It wouldn't have been right. It wouldn't have changed what he did. But Relly apparently would have been on an island where we couldn't have found him. He didn't want to do it. His choice, his option, his consequences. Now, the defense said that we believe, this is a quote, that that tape is, quote, death to our case. I don't know what he means by death. That is not death to our case. That tape was the key to Relly's credibility if you believe it is important. In other words, that tape backs up every material point that Relly has made. Okay, believability of witnesses. In determining the believability of a witness, this is Calpern 226, you may consider anything that has a tendency to prove or disprove the truthfulness of the witness. Again, I'll be very clear. Twelby and ASAP Lou came in there, and they repeatedly lied just about almost everything. I'm not going to go through all the inconsistencies. 12E didn't want to concede that he's reliant on the defendant. Didn't want to admit that he's talked to the defendant. If you believed 12E and Lou, they've had almost no conversations about what happened in this case since the start. And if you believe Wally, even though Wally is, quote, mediating the situation, he's never talked to Rocky about it. He's never talked to 12E about it. How do you mediate a situation when you're only talking to one party? It's just not true. They lied. The difference between Relly and the defense witnesses is Relly was hostile. Relly was angry. Relly threw things. Listen, that wasn't appropriate conduct. You saw the judge. The judge was very frustrated with him. Everybody was frustrated with him. Listen, Mr. Proslemek, that was his witness. That's no easy task for him. But in the end, his credibility about what counts in this case was absolutely proven, and it was proven through their own witness. The evidence in this case, remember, we didn't have that tape. That tape came from Wally. We heard that tape only slightly before you did. Wally comes in and testifies, they play a snippet, and we play the rest. So when you're looking at the factors, you're looking at what witnesses are to be believed. They called 3 witnesses. All 3 of them perjured themselves. All 3 of them lied. All 3 of them came in to protect the defendant. And although they were calmer and more respectful, they perjured themselves in material areas. Relly, on the other hand, was truthful about everything that counted. So the defense focused on the fact that basically you can reject the testimony of Relly if you find that he lied about anything. However, Calcrim 226 tells you do not automatically reject testimony just because of inconsistencies or conflicts. Consider whether the differences are important or not. So listen, is it true that Relly, at points in time, was untruthful during his testimony? Absolutely. When he's saying, I don't know my girlfriend's name, of course he knows his girlfriend's name. When he's saying he doesn't know about a place in Miami that he purchased, of course he knows. But those differences, those inconsistencies, those conflicts, they're not only not important, they are completely irrelevant. In talking about ASAP Lou for a second, I'm going to come back to that. Okay, let's talk about the injuries to Relly's hand. Now, the defense said, hey, prosecution, you did not call a witness to come in here and say that that is a wound from a gun. How is somebody going to be able to come look at an injury and tell you where it came from? Now, here's what you have to ask yourself. If there was something about that injury that was inconsistent, where it could not have come from a firearm.
Is this an exhibit? It's not evidence.
I believe this is the correct exhibit. Is this
It's the incorrect.
Oh, you know what? Hold on a minute. Let me back it up. That's my fault. I have the wrong picture. Excuse me. The same. Let me change it. Thank you. Okay. This is the correct exhibit. So we're still talking about the injury to the hands. And you know, without question, that if there was an expert who could come in here and testify, you know what? Those injuries could not have come from a graze wound. They would have called that witness. And again, how do you know? Look at the team that's standing over there. Look at the fact that they called in Wally. The purpose of calling Wally, bring him out from France, for thousands of dollars, obviously, was to simply impeach Relly with the fact that it was his voice. So if there was a medical professional who could come in here and tell you, well, that didn't come from a gunshot, you would have heard from them. And the failure to call a logical witness is something you can consider, and you should consider. And when the defense says, wait a minute, the people didn't call somebody in to testify, well, you have to ask yourselves, if we call someone in to testify, what are we going to be able to get from them? Do you think common sense, you don't have to be an expert, who can look at an injury like this and say, yeah, that came from a bullet? You can't. You can look at it and go, okay, could it be a graze wound? Sure. So if the defense had an expert that was going to say what they wanted, you would have heard from them. Okay, let's talk about Ills for a second. This was, again, the defense went all in on a couple of things. One of the things they went all in was that if there were casings at the scene, LAPD would have found them. Well, they didn't realize that the prop gun put out casings as well, and therefore the question isn't that LAPD missed the 9mm casings in this case. The issue is that without question, whether it was the 9mm or the prop gun, it would have left casings, and LAPD missed it. Why? We'll never know. Why did Relly find it? Well, he had the advantage of knowing exactly where it was. Same thing with Ills. Again, the plan was clearly from these witnesses, and particularly from 12E, we're going to build up the fact that Relly gave Ills a beatdown. This had to do with his strength, how strong he is. He's punching him in the fist. Remember the judge? I still think there's a difference between a closed fist and a regular fist. But the judge, if you remember, when I mentioned closed fist, the judge said, well, a fist is a fist. It doesn't really matter. Their testimony was, and even today, you've got the defense saying how Relly is landing haymakers on Ills. They said that he was bleeding. Okay? Relly's a big guy. He's very strong. They said he was punched in the face at least 3 times. Well, I guess they didn't realize we were going to have a video the next day, less than 24 hours later. And this is from the video. Look at his face. No injuries. No injuries. Nothing. 0. Still photo from the video. Nothing. That is not the face of somebody that was punched in the face repeatedly, given a beating by a large, strong man less than 24 hours before. Someone who they said was bleeding from an injury to the lip when we see nothing. And by the way, where is Ills? Ills is his friend, Rocky's friend. If you think for a moment that Ills would have had something helpful to say in this case, they would have called him. And when they said, wait a minute, the people needed to call him, why on earth would it make sense for the people to call one of the 3 individuals who was clearly involved in ambushing Relly in the first place and who is reliant on the defendant for his career? If Ills had anything helpful, they would have called him.
The objection
Overruled. So, I brought this up in voir dire, and this is really important, an idea that I wanted to make sure you guys understand. We mentioned that we might have to be a little bit aggressive on cross-examination. And I wanted to make sure, and I asked you all in advance, hey, listen, if we have to be aggressive in cross-examination with witnesses, are you going to hold that against us? You all said that you wouldn't. Now, whether you all found Mr. Przlemek to be too aggressive, too loud, too mean, I can't control this man. I could try, but it's impossible. And again, I make that joke because obviously, I'm an intense guy. This is a serious situation we're in. And Mr. Tacopina got up here, he explained to you what it's like to be a defense attorney, what it's like to have what he said is an innocent client. Let me tell you something. I want you to imagine right now that someone you cared about was a victim. What kind of prosecutor would you want? Would you want somebody who takes what they're doing seriously, who is aggressive, who does their job, and who goes after witnesses who need going after? So, I'm not asking you guys to like me. It'd be nice if you did. That's not what this case is about. It's not about me, my personality. It's not about Mr. Tacopina's personality. It's about what the evidence in the case is. And there's a great quote. Professor John Henry Whitmore, Northwestern Law School dean, he also wrote a series of books, legal books. He was a scholar. And what he said was, cross-examination is beyond any doubt the greatest legal engine ever invented for the discovery of truth. The defense put up 3 witnesses who lied about basically every material fact they were asked about. Those lies were exposed through cross-examination. Was it gentle? It wasn't. But that's what it took. And I won't apologize for it. I said before, I can't expect you all to do your job if I don't do mine. All right, let's talk about what the elements are of assault with a semi-automatic firearm, 245B. 1, you don't need to actually touch someone with it. So the fact that did the defendant touch Relly with the gun on the first incident, it doesn't matter. By the way, he pulls the gun out. If any of you are buying the idea, as 12 said, that it fell out when his pants were being pulled up, then I'm up here wasting my breath. I would add that you're all intelligent people, and if anybody is even remotely considering that, I would ask you to ask yourselves and to ask them, is that what you think, or are you trying to find a way to not convict this man because of who he is? The issue of treating everybody equally, it's paramount to our criminal justice system. So, again, back to the elements, you don't need to actually touch someone. The evidence is that he did. You do not need to intend to use the force, meaning you don't have to pull that gun, meaning that you're planning on shooting it. You don't actually need to injure someone. You don't need to fire the gun. You don't even need to point the gun at the victim. This is in the instruction. And that also goes for the personal use of the firearm. Now, the one thing is, it has to be a firearm. And again, and I'm going to go back to this because it's so important. The defense is it was a prop gun. That's the issue in this case. They say it's a prop gun. They say all the evidence shows it's a prop gun. We say it's a firearm. Once you decide that it is a firearm, that means that their entire defense has fallen apart. And now what Mr. Tacopina apparently wants you to do is say, well, even if the witnesses we put on lied, even if it was a real gun, here's why it was self-defense. There's an old story about it's a civil case, civil lawyer, and he has a dog bite case. And he is defending his client was the dog, and they're being sued. The client is being sued because his dog has allegedly bitten somebody. He gets up in closing argument and he says as follows: "Hey, listen, my client's dog, there's no way he could have done any kind of damage to the plaintiff because he was on a leash. He was in the yard, could not have gotten to where he says he got. But if you find that he was loose, the dog's old, and he couldn't have done any damage with those old teeth of his. But okay, if you find that he was off leash and he had some big teeth, well, my final defense is my client doesn't own a dog." That's what we have here. It's no different. It's a prop gun. Absolutely a prop gun. Evidence doesn't show it's a prop gun, but it's a prop gun. But if you find it's not a prop gun, here's why Rocky fired a real gun in self-defense. It is almost insulting because it is so inconsistent. So when a defendant equips and positions himself to carry out a battery, he has the present ability required, even if some steps remain to be taken. This is basically saying once he's taken that gun out and he's committed the assault, when that gun comes out, at that point in time, the assault's done. So this is the 3470, the right to self-defense. And this is really important because remember, it only applies if it is a real gun and not a prop gun. But it's a little more than that, because what it basically says is you have to show that they are acting in lawful self-defense or of defense of another. The defense position in this case is that the defendant was acting to protect Relly and Gills. But it's more than that, okay? So basically they're saying that defendant believed that he, Gills, and Twelby were in imminent danger, okay, of suffering bodily injury. And by the way, and you all know this, if someone is in danger of being touched unlawfully, you can't shoot them, okay? You don't have to actually go through jury instructions to figure that out, okay? If I go and I slap one of you guys, you can't shoot me. And why is that? Because he's got to believe that the immediate use of force was necessary to defend against the danger and that it was no more force than was reasonably necessary to defend against the danger. So, what does all this mean? Well, they're basically claiming that the defendant used a prop gun, which means self-defense doesn't apply. So, as soon as you find that out, you're done. But they're also arguing, hey, if you find, well, then it was a gun, even though that's not our argument. And Mr. Tacopina wouldn't come out and say it. But that's what the law is. If you don't believe me, you can ask the judge. Self-defense only applies in this case if it's a real gun. And the problem is, it also only applies if the force used was no more than reasonably necessary to defend against that danger. And now let's look at what that alleged danger is. There is no beating up of Gills, okay? There was no beating up of Gills. It's a lie. It's not true. You see the video. But even if somehow you wanted to argue, and you know it's a lie, because you can see that the gun, you can't see what the item is. So let's be clear. You can see Rocky pulling something out. You can't tell what it is. But you can then see that what he takes, he ends up putting out in front of him and aiming and shooting. That is what prompts Relly to grab Ills. They say, well, he had to use, I guess, and Mr. Tech can never argue this. He can't because it's inconsistent with his theory. But the theory would have to be that Rocky ended up firing the gun at at Relly, because Ills was in imminent danger. What imminent danger? He's got no injury. It's made up. The defense is created. Didn't happen. Very important. Belief in future harm is not sufficient. So even if you somehow believe that Relly was going to cause future harm, it doesn't work. He has to have believed at the time that there was imminent danger of bodily injury. Imminent danger of bodily injury. Okay? That's what you need. It has to be reasonable, and he has to act because of that belief. You don't have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's why the defense didn't really argue it, because they are riding the boat. Their position is the dog was off the leash. Sorry, the dog was on the leash. Not that the dog had no teeth, and not that the guy didn't own the dog. But in the end, that's what their argument requires. You have to believe inconsistent defenses. It just doesn't work. Now again, the slightest touching, we're not talking about the slightest touching. They're basically saying that in the first incident, they're trying to argue that Relly is the aggressor when the facts in the video don't show it. Even if he grabbed his arm, no one says he has a weapon. You cannot pull a gun on somebody who doesn't have a weapon, who's not physically hurting you. You can't threaten him with a firearm. I mean, I don't have to explain that to you all. You understand that. You can't do it. It doesn't work. So we have the burden of proving that beyond a reasonable doubt. However, again, it doesn't come into existence until you find that it was a real gun. And once you find it's a real gun, it means their entire defense was fabricated. It wasn't true. Automatically. There was no way that it could be a real gun and the defense was not fabricated. Those are impossible. Those are mutually inconsistent possibilities. And when I say possibilities, meaning alternatives. So, a person who starts a fight has a right to self-defense. Relly did not start this fight. The defendant started this fight. And he has to actually, in good faith, he's got to try to stop fighting, which he doesn't. He's the aggressor. Both incidents. And in no way is element 2 satisfied either. So you can play games debating how a self-defense claim that the defense is not even relying on doesn't apply to the case. But you know that. Their defense is, no question, it's prop gun. A person also cannot claim self-defense if they are the one that provokes a fight or quarrel with the intent to create an excuse to use force. And that's what happened here. Relly didn't even use any force. Basically, the defendant assaults him with a firearm because he's mad at him. Shoots at him again because either Relly said something or he's still angry. So, in the end, the statements, Terrell gave a lot of statements in this case. And about all the issues that matter, he was consistent. Now, they want to say, but wait a minute. He originally said it was 3 to 4 shots. And imagine for a second. Remember, he doesn't know in advance the defendant is going to shoot. So his memory, and you can all, it's not hard to imagine, you're in a situation where you believe you're fighting for your life. How do you know that Relly was fighting for his life? He's telling Wally he was fighting for his life. He's saying the defendant tried to take him from his daughter. He believes at the time the defendant has fired 3 or 4 shots. And when he talks to Wally, he says 5 shots. That doesn't matter. That's not a question of credibility, and here's why. If Relly were making this up, and remember what they're saying, they're also saying that Relly had to have planted the 9mm casings. Okay? And let's talk about that for a second, because it's important. They are saying, hey, listen, Relly was out here 2 weeks before this shooting, and we don't know that he went back home. So apparently, Relly planned this out in advance. He got 9mm casings from when he went target shooting, knowing that 2 weeks later the defendant would be upset with him, would text him repeatedly, and would assault him with a 9mm firearm, and he would have casings ready to put at the scene. But just to make it extra difficult, he's going to tell the cops, you know what, I got shot there were 3 or 4 gunshots, but he's only going to turn in 2 casings. So remember, if he's making up this whole thing, which of course he isn't, he is certainly going to produce the amount of casings at the scene that he is saying happened. That's an irrefutable concept. And that's not what occurs. And the idea that somehow Relly is Nostradamus and knows all these things are going to happen. And let's look at what had to occur. It's 10 p.m. on a Saturday night in Hollywood. Relly doesn't live here. We know from ASAP Lou, he can't go out and buy ammunition. He doesn't have a gun. So he certainly could not have, after this incident, bought a gun, fired the ammunition, and dumped it at the scene. So that means that he's carrying around 9mm casings just in case the defendant assaults him. It's absurd. Then they say, well, wait a minute. You know that it's made up because look at the magazine that's found at the defendant's house. And now we go back to ASAP Lou. Listen, ASAP Lou, Preslemic, he really covered it pretty accurately. He's the Swiss Army knife of assistants, advisors, security stuff. You need a personal assistant, lose your guy. You need someone to give you advice on security, lose your guy. You need someone to come over to stay for a search warrant, lose your guy. You need someone to help you get a prop gun, lose your guy. You need someone to get rid of that prop gun after an incident where that prop gun will prove you to be innocent, lose your guy. Lou's version of what happened is nearly impossible. What is that version? And this is really important because remember, we didn't find out about it at the time. So here's what we know. The evidence in this case that you have, and I confronted the witnesses, is that 12E testified that what he told the defense, what was in the statement we were given, was that the defendant decided to carry a prop gun because he had been the victim of home invasions and violence. Let's just look at that for a moment. Nothing about any particular incidents. And then he gets on the stand and he starts testifying about all these incidents. But he says, oh, well, I told them. I told them about it. I think I told them. I guess I don't know. These alleged incidents of prior violence. And supposedly there's a security person. Just think about this for a moment. 12E testifies that the defendant and he were stabbed at a club with a knife. That there's been a crazy stalker inside the defendant's house. That he's been the victim of other violence. And we're to believe that a security consultant said, hey, you know what you should do? You should carry a fake gun. Because individuals who are going to, and by the way, a home invasion, defense counsel, wait a minute, it's different when you're at your home. That's what 12E said. Those were his words, home invasions and violence. Someone comes in your home. How is a prop gun going to help you? How is a prop gun going to help you against anybody? As soon as you pull a prop gun on somebody, they are going to believe that that prop gun is real. And if they have their own weapon, out of necessity, they're going to have to fire back. It's not just bad advice. It's complete insanity and it's made up. But the situation here is even worse. Because remember, they're saying that Relly knew it was a prop gun from the start. If he knows it's a prop gun, then what is the use in Rocky pulling it out in the first place? It would have no value. Relly said, of course, I didn't know it was a prop gun. It wasn't a prop gun. It shot me. But the idea, you don't even need Relly's testimony. The idea, they're the ones saying, their defense is, Relly knew it was a prop gun. He stands up and says, put that fake-ass gun away. You look at him in the second incident. Is he acting like that's a fake-ass gun? Is anyone acting like it's a fake-ass gun? Is the defendant acting like it's a fake-ass gun? Of course not, because it wasn't fake. And now let's look at Lew. Lew says, well, so here's what happened. Originally, we hear nothing about the circumstances of I went over to the house and we were going to go shooting. We don't hear any of that. All that he says, now he said, I might have told the defense, I might not have, I don't remember. I didn't get into particulars. Are you kidding me? It's the entire case. But all of a sudden, he gets on the stand and he says, for the first time, well, here's what happened. I was going to teach the defendant, we were going to go shooting at a gun range. So I brought my Glock 380, which does not use 9mm ammunition, and I brought my Smith & Wesson 9mm, which cannot use a Glock 9mm Glock 43 magazine. It won't fit. They don't even look anywhere the same, and that is from Lew. Look completely different. He says, he gets over to the house, and that's when he realizes for the first time, oh my God, I bought the wrong magazine for my Glock. Now, does it make sense that he felt a need to go out and buy a magazine for his gun, and then did not find out for some period of time, he wouldn't say where he bought it, when he bought it, and it was not for the right gun, but he made another mistake that he clearly wasn't aware of. I confronted him with the fact, he said, well, so I realized that when I was over there, I tried to put the 9mm, or the 380 ammunition in, and it wouldn't fit. Okay. But why was it found loaded completely with 9mm ammunition? As soon as it didn't fit, he would stop. And after it's, well, I'm a fidgety dude. I'm a fidgety dude. So while I was drinking, I was fidgeting, just loading a gun, loading a magazine for a gun I don't have and the defendant doesn't have. They spent a lot of time telling you, well, wait a minute. That magazine is new, hasn't been used. I asked Lew, isn't it true, Lew, that when you buy a gun, a new gun, most of the time they come with 2 magazines? Well, I don't know. I usually only buy 1. Well, it's interesting because he clearly went out and bought a second magazine for the 380. So not quite understanding what that means. But what is very clear, ladies and gentlemen, is here's what happened. Lew doesn't own a Glock 43. He's never had one registered. So he has no reason to have a magazine for a gun he doesn't own. The defendant doesn't have a Glock 43 magazine. He has no reason to have a Glock 43 magazine for a gun he doesn't own. However, there is evidence that suggests that the gun that was used in this crime was a Glock 43. It doesn't have to be, but it is consistent with the evidence. And what is clear is that the defendant got rid of the gun after the incident. Now, he says the gun he got rid of was a prop gun. That's not what the evidence shows. He got rid of that 9mm and the magazine that went with it. But he clearly forgot that in his closet was a second magazine for that gun. A magazine that clearly was not being used in that gun and very well might have been new because he was using the magazine that was in the gun when it was fired at Relly. So Lew's version is completely impeached, but it's even worse than that. So they apparently have this information. Twelvey and Lew have information about this prop gun that will completely prove that the defendant did not commit this crime. And when does it get turned over to prosecutors and police for the first time? January 20th, the day before this trial started. Now they say, oh no, but actually, we told them about it in August 16th or 17th of 2024. That's still almost 3 years after the incident occurred. Remember, ASAP Lou is at the house when the search warrant is served. He didn't even have to go to the police. All he has to do is say, hey, you know what? That magazine, that 9mm magazine, that's mine. By the way, it was a prop gun that he had. Nothing. You know why he didn't say it? Because he hadn't made up the defense yet. That's why. Do you know why 12 didn't say anything? Because he hadn't made up the defense yet. That's what the evidence shows. And then what happened? Literally on February 9th, the morning that Lou is going to testify, we are given information. Oh, it turns out that Lou gave the gun to somebody in New York. And that's why they don't have the gun. Now remember, we're finding this out on what is basically the last day of the trial. We don't have the ability to get that person. But the defense, that's someone they've known about all along. Where is he to testify about this gun? They're saying we have to bring this person out here when there's no reason to believe that anything that person is going to say is true. But we're supposed to bring that person out here who we don't even know exists to prove that it's not a prop gun. That it's not a prop gun when that's their witness. Do you not think for a moment that if that witness could have withstood cross-examination, they would have brought him out here? Of course they would have. And how do you know that any of this is true? Because you're instructed on it. So the defense spent a long time attacking me, primarily me, attacking Relic. Where is the instruction about evidence that I ended up fabricating? It says if the defendant tried to hide evidence or discourage someone from testifying against him, that conduct may show that he was aware of his guilt. What does that mean? That instruction is because the defendant, by his own, meaning the defense admission, through their witnesses, is that the defendant got rid of the prop gun. The piece of evidence that would demonstrate that he's innocent of these charges, that he got rid of that gun after the incident. The judge isn't going to give that instruction unless that instruction is something you can consider. Not going to do it. What does it say? If the defendant tried to hide evidence or discourage someone from testifying against him, that conduct may show that he was aware of his guilt. If you conclude that the defendant made such an attempt, it is up to you to decide its meaning and importance. However, evidence of such an attempt cannot prove guilt by itself. So in other words, just because the defendant got rid of the gun, that's not enough to prove to you by itself that the defendant is guilty of these crimes. But when you put it with everything else, it is a huge piece of evidence. If someone other than the defendant tried to create false evidence, provide false testimony, or conceal or destroy evidence, that conduct may show the defendant was aware of his guilt. But only if the defendant was present and knew about that conduct, or if not present, authorized the other person's actions. Circumstantially, the evidence suggests that ASAP Lou and Twelby and Wally are not doing this on their own. The evidence, the direct evidence from Wally is that he talked to the defendant immediately afterwards, their conversation. The idea that ASAP Lou and ASAP Twelby were not having repeated conversations about this incident strains any even idea of reality. You all know that's not true. Of course they talked about it. Obviously, it's a huge incident that occurred. So that is an instruction you were given. It doesn't say anything about Relly. There's no instruction like that for Relly in this case. Flight. If the defendant fled immediately after the crime was committed, that conduct may show that he was aware of his guilt. What does that mean? After the incident, guys, the second incident, he takes off. If it is in fact, if it was simply a prop gun, why is he running? Why is 12 running? Why are they getting out of there? Why are they getting rid of the gun? I mean, I'm trying to argue to you guys, why is the sky blue? And I hope that when you're listening to it, I hope you're all understanding this is not a complicated, complex case. In the end, the evidence in this case, almost all of it, it's not circumstantial. So the video is direct evidence. It's direct evidence of what happened. The testimony of the witnesses is direct evidence. Relly's statement on the call is direct evidence. The testimony, as incredible and unreliable as it is, of Wally, of 12 and of ASAP Lou is direct evidence. This is not a circumstantial evidence case. About the only circumstantial evidence in this case that you have that matters is circumstantially we have to prove that the defendant pointed the gun at Relly in the first incident because we don't have it on video. But we've got his gun being pulled out, we have his gun in front of him, and we have Relly in that position. We have him fighting with Relly right before and fighting with him right after. So the only reasonable interpretation of that circumstantial evidence is what you're seeing. Defendant's failure to call logical witnesses. This is really important. I've mentioned this before. Every argument that the defense made, the defense, and again, I'm not blaming Mr. Tacopina. The witnesses got up here and lied. Mr. Tacopina gets a statement from the witnesses. The witnesses say what they're going to say. He calls them. Mr. Tacopina does not vouch for his witnesses, meaning, just as we don't. We call witnesses, and those witnesses testify, and you evaluate them. However, it is certainly legitimate that all these individuals that the defense is saying, why didn't the people call them? Those are witnesses that they are saying we have to introduce to disprove their fabricated defense, which we don't have the ability to do because they control that evidence and information. They've got the prop gun. We don't. They have these witnesses they don't tell us about. We don't. We have proven that this was not a prop gun in every way that we can. It defies common sense, it defies logic, and it defies all the other evidence that we've been given. Now listen, I'm not blaming the defense for what they've come up with. When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Okay? That's what they've tried to do. They have tried to take a case, and they got bad luck. Imagine, guys, for a second, if we didn't have those video cameras. Imagine what the defense would be. Well, you can't show anything happening. This is all made up. You got nothing. But we have the video. We have the gunshots. That's bad luck for the defendant. And again, that's the situation he made. That's his luck. Now, one of the things that's going to happen is you're going to go back there. And we talked a little bit about this before. Let's assume that somebody, when you go back there, starts saying, what if, isn't it possible that, could this have happened? You are not allowed to speculate outside the evidence. That also goes for things like, well, gosh, what if Rocky gets prison on this case? I don't want to go to prison. If any one of you feel that yourselves, you need to let the court know, I can't serve as a juror on this case. That's okay. Some of you during voir dire at points said, I don't know about certain things. And if you remember, the judge told different jurors, hey, listen, if at any point in time you cannot live up to your oath, let the judge know. If one of the rest of you decide, I'll give you an example. Let's say someone goes back there and they say, you know what, I really dislike DDA Lewin. I don't like him. I didn't like him when I saw him. He's obnoxious, etc. Whatever. If that is what you are basing your verdict on, it's improper. It's misconduct. If someone says, I'm never going to convict on a case because I don't like Lewin. If it's you and you can't get past it, you need to report yourself to the court. If it's someone else, they need to do it. We don't know if misconduct happens unless you let the court know about it. So if people, yourself, others are not living up to their responsibilities, you need to let everybody know. That goes the same for the celebrity issue. Okay? The defendant should not be convicted because he's a celebrity. But he also should not be acquitted because he's a celebrity. He should not be acquitted because he's got a lovely family. He should not be acquitted because he's successful and wealthy. He should not be acquitted because he can go out there and entertain people and make millions of dollars. Those are factors I'm not just recommending, you're not allowed to consider those factors. All you're doing is you're going to weigh the evidence in this case and you're going to come to your decision. Reasonable doubt in this case. So, proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof that leaves you with an abiding conviction that the charge is true. The evidence need not eliminate all possible doubt because everything in life is open to some possible or imaginary doubt. What does that mean? Well, it simply means that you're going back and you're going to look and you're going to say to yourselves, okay, here's the case that people presented. The people have presented evidence that the defendant used a real gun. Have we proven that it was a real gun? Not just from our case, but from the evidence that the defense put on as well. They've argued this is a prop gun. And when anybody goes back there and says, well, wait a minute, I don't like Relly, I don't find Relly credible. The problem is, what do you need to find Relly credible about? The evidence is they're admitting it's him. They're admitting it's a gun. They're admitting he fired it. They're admitting that's him at both locations. The only thing that they are really disputing is they're disputing that Rocky ever put the gun up to him in the first incident, which, by the way, once he pulls it out and he's pointing it and you can see it, he doesn't have to point it at him, but once that gun comes out in that situation, you can read the elements of 245. They've met it. The second incident's easy. He actually fires the gun. So, where exactly is Relly's credibility? Where is it material? It isn't. They have put Relly on trial in this case because in the end, he is a very convenient target. Legally, it doesn't work. Commonsensically, it doesn't work. But that's what they've argued. You can come and should come to the conclusion in this case, beyond a reasonable doubt, based on the video and based on the defense in this case. But if you need Relly's credibility, the best evidence you have comes from Wally, their witness, and that tape. That's the only thing you need to listen to. Any testimony in court, that's in court. Everyone knows why we're in court. That is the one piece of evidence coming from the defense where there's no argument that Relly knew he was being taped. There's no argument that he had any incentive to be untruthful. And you listen to him and you know what he is saying is true. He is shocked. He is basically telling Wally, dude, I tried to get money from him. He didn't want to give me any money. Why'd you bring the boys in? He won't give me any money. He tried to kill me. He tried to shoot me. No question. By the way, Wally never mentions it's a prop gun because the defense had not been thought of yet. We started off in this case very early on. We started off with the situation with Boomer. And Boomer is a very important illustration of the difference between what's reasonable and what's possible. And as you remember, we know what happened. We know that the evidence demonstrated that Boomer was the one that got into the trash. And the evidence has demonstrated in this case, beyond any reasonable doubt whatsoever, that the defendant, Keem Mayers, that on November 6th, 2021, that he committed these crimes. I'm going to end with this. We've done our job in this case. We have. We've put on more than enough evidence through our case, through the cross-examination of witnesses. We've done our job. I'm going to ask you all to do yours, whether you want to convict the defendant or not. Based on the evidence, that's what you're compelled to do. Because we can't have individuals, we can't have it, deciding that because they're angry, or they're upset, or they've been disrespected, that they're going to be allowed to go out and shoot at people on the street on a busy Saturday night. We cannot have it. As you go back there, and I'm going to say this again, the first thing that I would ask you to do is to decide, was this a prop gun or not? And if you decide it is a prop gun, for those of you who do, you're going to have to get past all of the nonsensical evidence in this case. You need to ask yourselves, are you following the evidence? Are you following your head, or are you following your heart for whatever reason? Once you do that, the case is over, because that means the defense is fabricated. That means it was a real gun. That means you can't believe anything that was said by any of their witnesses. And that means that in the end, the defendant used a real firearm and committed these crimes. Again, as defense counsel stated, I want to thank you all for your time and for your attention. And I too want to thank Judge Arnold. It's not been an easy case. And I want to ask, to the best of your ability, when you go back there, you pretend that he's not ASAP Rocky. You pretend that he's just a guy named Keem Mayers. And you treat him the way you would treat anybody else who was accused of these crimes with this evidence. And when you return a guilty verdict, that is not on you. That's on him. Because that is what the evidence has demonstrated. Do not let anybody tell you that you own his conduct. He owns it. On November 6th, he made a very foolish decision. An illegal decision. A criminal decision. A decision that could have hurt individuals far worse than what happened. And it's your job and your responsibility to hold him accountable. Because if we're not going to hold privileged people accountable, who are we going to hold accountable? Again, thank you for your time and attention.